In this video, I'm going to build this slick looking Catalogue canvas app. I'm going to build it end to end, so this is the longest video I've ever done, but the solution is going to be free to download from my website. If you do download it, please consider showing your support by buying me a coffee, and remember to subscribe to stay notified about all my future videos. Let's get stuck in. So now we're in the app, we need to get it set up. We're going to use some basic containers just to get our layout options like we said. The first thing I always do is I go in now and I just put on the modern controls and themes. I really like using the new themes, keeps everything simple and clean. Switch the theme over if you need to, making it reusable. And the modern controls are just really easy to use once you get used to. On the screen first, we're going to set our first container, which is going to be our horizontal container. This one doesn't have anything to tell it where to be. So we need to set this one up as x0, y0. We're going to set the width of the app to the app.width. We're going to set the height to the app.height. That's going to fill the entire screen, and then we just need a couple more. So we need that left hand side and the right hand side, and then we're going to put some more options in there. So if we first insert our vertical container, you'll notice that comes up with flexible width at a fill portion of 1 of 1. So that's going to take up the whole of that container. I'm going to put another vertical container in. Ooh, we put that one inside the other one. Put that one down there. So you can see it comes up and you get 50-50. So it's taken up one of two proportions there. Now I want the left-hand side to be a specific width. So let's just figure out, let's just see, maybe we'll set that to take the width off. Start at about 300. Yeah, that looks perfect. The other great thing I've learned about design is lots of space. So we want to keep things clean and nice. We want to make it readable. If we have everything on the edges and crunched together, it's really difficult to read. So what I'm actually going to do is for my main container, I'm just going to pop some padding around the entire app. We're going to put a cool background on this as well. So we want that to kind of be seen. So if I just put 60, you can see that drops everything into the middle. And then we've got a nice working canvas in the middle, nice space around where we can put a cool color. First thing as well on these, I'm just going to take the shadows off. They come with a light one as default. We don't want that on these. We're going to drop that off. We've got our containers in there. And then we've got our background. And the other thing I'm just going to do with these is I'm going to take the radius off of them. You might not see them. I just want to make sure that they're not going to show any rounded corners if we put any funny colors in. We've got our basic app set up. Now onto the cool bit. I'm going to show you how to put an SVG background in, and then we're going to modern theme our SVG background. So I found this cool site, svgbackgrounds.com. It's very hard to find free SVG backgrounds. There's loads that you can get that are paid. For this demo though, we're just going to pull one of these out. In the screenshots that I showed, I'm using this one here. The reason I'm using this one is we're actually going to manually set the colors. And this one has very few colors. You can do it with some of the others, but they'll be slightly more complex and you'll have a lot of colors in there. So I'm just going to use this one. Now we need to export this as an SVG. So yes, Matt, I will definitely credit your work. I've been using it in my demos, so I'm definitely thankful. So let's grab that SVG, copy it over. We go to our first screen, you can see you've got background image here. So we're going to use background image. Now, if we just go and paste this in directly, let's have a see what it looks like. You can see it's a set of like HTML, CSS code, but it's an SVG. So it's telling the background where all those different patterns are, and it's got some colors in here as well. Now, it does not going to work straight away. We need to do something with it first. And sometimes when you get an SVG backgrounds, you'll see that there's lots of double quotes. Luckily for us, this is all in single quotes. If you have one with double quotes, just use your find all of the double quotes and replace them with single quotes, as simple as that. Do that first because we're going to put some double quotes in afterwards. Now to tell this is an SVG, there's something we just need to add to the very beginning of it. I'm just going to grab the code for that. The first thing is we need to add a type identifier in front of it. So this is going to tell our background image control that this is in fact an image and that it's an SVG. We're going to start with that code, and then what we need to do is we need to concatenate it. We use an ampersand, and then we use this encode URL function. So this is going to encode all of this SVG code into something that can be read by the image control. So we just put the entire SVG in double quotes, close our encode URL. And if we drop out, you see we've got that background in place. And we could mess around with the height and width. For the purpose of this, I'm just going to set it to fill so that it fills the entire screen. I'm not exactly worried that it fits perfectly. Now you can see here we've got these color codes. So it's giving it this nice pink. I want to use my modern themes. So what we need to do is we need to replace these colors. So we could put an ampersand. So we need to just break out of that. So we're adding in some code inside of our string. We're going to concatenate it. And now when I use colors, I use app.theme.colors, and then I use the primary. You've got darker, lighter. Now these will change when you change your theme. So if you use these throughout your app, you don't have to go and change all your colors. Everything will move with the modern theme. Theme.colors.primary. So you see that's not working. And why is it not working? So it's telling us that actually it's expecting some text. And the problem is this is a color. It doesn't actually come out as a hex value. And we can turn these into hex values. It's not simple, but it is possible. I'll show you how we do that. So in order to test it so we can kind of see what's happening, we're going to put a text control in here for now. Expand that out so we can actually see it. Now I'm going to put in the app.theme.colors in that primary. Now it's obviously not a text value, it's showing a color. But what we can do is we can try and turn it into text. Still nothing. But the secret here is we actually tell it this is JSON. Now we can see we've got a hex value. That still won't work directly because we've got these double quotes inside there. So there's a couple of different ways to do this, but I'm going to show you one that we can use that is called substringing. So we can either take the left hand side of a string by an index value, or we can take the right hand side of a string, or we can take the middle of a string. So what we're going to do is we're going to use mid. We're going to say mid. We're going to say this text JSON app theme colors price. We want the middle of it. We want to start at index 2, which is the second character along, because we didn't want that first double quote. Then we're going to say we want to end at the end. Now the only way to work that out is to say len. Len says what is the length of this string. So what is the length of that string? I want the length of it, and I want you to take 2 off of it. There we go. So you can see here now we've got a full hex code. We've got the hash and we've got all of the values for the primary color. So that now we could use directly. If we wanted to go back to our background, which isn't working because we put this app theme primary color in, and put that whole piece of code in there. You can see now it's using the modern theme. So if I switch this, you'll see the color switch. That's kind of what we're looking for. Now we can go one further because I need to replace a lot of colors in here, and I'm kind of saying this twice. So in good coding, we don't want to have to repeat ourselves loads of times. I don't want to have to say this one's this one, that one's that one. This is where we're going to use the named function, user-defined functions. So this is a really cool new feature. Now it is experimental, but it's really, really going to change the way we build Power Apps. Instead of having to write loads of code and repeat ourselves and use on selects and loads of random ways to do it, we can now actually just write a function or a formula, and we can reuse that formula. Let's take this entire piece of code here. And what we need to do then is we need to head over to our app. And in app, if we use our drop down now, you'll see this. It's called formulas. And the way we build formulas is we give it a name. We're going to call this one get hex color. And we're going to open bracket. And the first thing we need to do is we need to tell it an input. You can use these for basic maths. You can say input two numbers, and then you can multiply them and it will give the result out. For this one, we want to put an input color. So we say input color. This is the name, so we can call this whatever we want. This is the name of the property that we're going to give it, and then we need to give it a type. So you can see all the different options here. We can send it a GUID, hyperlink, number, text. Thankfully, we can send it a color directly. So we can just put a color straight into this formula, and it's going to spit something out. Next, we need to tell it what is it that's going to spit out. Now, in this instance, the hex code is just text. It's just a string. So we're going to say we want text back out. Then we're going to say equals. And this is where we write our actual formula. So if I paste that in there, so we're actually just looking directly at the app theme.colors.primary. Now, I want to reuse this not just for primary colors. I want to use it for lighter, darker. I want to convert any color in a Power App into a hex value. What we can actually do is we can say, well, this is the input color. We can pop that in as our input color. That in as our input color. Finish that. So now what we're saying is every time I call get hex color, I give it a color. It's going to convert it using this formula. It's going to give me back a text. If we use this now, if we go into our app, go to our screen, go to background image, where I've written this long lengthy piece of code, I can now use my get hex color. So you can see here, if I hover over the top of it, it's saying, yeah, I know your get hex color. And the IntelliSense should tell you that actually, yeah, you need app, you need a color. So app.theme.colors.primary. And now, if we have a look at our background, it's still doing exactly what we wanted, but we haven't had to write lengthy pieces of code. Then what we can do is we can replace all of our hex values similarly. So we just need to break out of the string, concatenate the new string in. So we've got one color there, we've got a stop color, we've got a stop color, we've got another stop color here, another stop color here. So now it's going to be all one color. We can play around with these. So we can say this one was a lighter 50. That looks like much better. And then we can say with these ones, yeah, these are darker. So let's put darker 50. Cool. So now you can see it's actually just adapting to the theme as well. So if I go and change my theme, I've got purple darker lighter, steel darker lighter, SharePoint darker lighter, and even add our own theme. So let's call this demo theme. Absolutely loving pinks and blues at the moment. Seems to be in fashion. So let's drop a nice pink in there. There we go. That's adapted. Just to make this look a bit nicer, I'm just going to mess around with the colors a little bit. Here's one I played around with and prepared earlier. Let's go and drop this over on this screen. I've got a darker one there, primary, and then the lighters. Yes, look at that, lovely. And one of my favorite colors at the moment, let's change this to this. And also I'm just going to change the font as well. I don't really like that standard font. There we go. So we've got a nice cool background that we can use here as well. So now we need to put some data into it. I'm going to use collections just because it's easier for a demo. You could use Dataverse, which is the preferred option. You could use SharePoint list, which isn't a preferred option. If you need to, because you don't have premium, or if that's where your items are stored, then feel free to do that. I've pre-prepared. So if we go to our app on start, paste this in. I've got clear collect. I just need to drop these images in. Now, secret, I actually didn't write this myself. I literally asked ChatGPT. I said, give me 10 or 15 work clothing items. I said, I want a name, description, category, cost, and then I've added the image myself. You can actually build a Dataverse table and ask it to add records if you want to with Copilot now, which is pretty cool. Makes doing demos so much easier. You don't have to worry about typing all this out. Feel free to use that. I mean, I'll give you this solution, so these will be in here. I'm just going to quickly go and add all these images. By the magic of YouTube, all the images are in there. These obviously would come from your own data source. So you'd have them in a SharePoint list, SharePoint library. They could be in your Dataverse. But for the sake of the demo, I'm just going to dump them straight in here and we're going to refer to them. So now we've got all of our media. Now we can start building out our actual app. So we're going to move on to building out the dynamic filtering categories. So in my left-hand container, I'm now going to drop a vertical container. So in my left-hand container, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to drop in a text. Just going to set that to the full width using the aligning container stretch button down here. I'm going to just bring that up to about 22, make it a bit bigger. And then I'm going to set the color to white because the black's just not really going to look good on this background. This background, because it's colorful, is going to look perfect with white. We're going to set it off. And next, we just need to insert a gallery. Let's just insert a vertical gallery. Let's going to come with all the lovely templates that Microsoft have built. Thank you, but I'm not going to use those ones. I'm going to set that to blank because we're going to put our own layout inside of it as well. Now, this is automatically, you can see, quite large. The gallery is outside of my container here. I need to bring that down. If we have a look at the width on this one, you can see it's set pretty large. I actually want to set that to stretch, so I want it to be exactly the same size. Now, one thing to note when you are doing this is it'll have a width, and when you set it to flex, it'll have a minimum width. Now, sometimes that's actually larger than the container it's in, and it'll push itself out. What you should be doing for responsive design is actually working out a minimum width, but for the sake of a demo, I'm just going to completely drop that off so that it sits inside our container. So that's now going to flex in and out based on the size of that container. Now we need to add our items to it. So if we add our collection, a prefixed with col, that is col work clothing items. Stick those in there. Now we've got our work clothing items, we can actually start adding something. Now this is not the actual items itself, this is just a list of the categories that we want to get from it. Now what we don't want to have to do is just write out all the categories, because that means if we add a new item into our asset collection, then we're going to have to re-add a category to it. We want it to just dynamically filter those out. So actually we're not going to use just col work clothing items. What we're actually going to do is we're going to do a distinct. So distinct says for a specific column in a collection or a table, only get me the distinct items, just the unique items. And in this case, it's the category. There we go. So that will give me the distinct categories. If I just quickly add some text in here, set that to white, and we're going to set it to this item.value. We just need to run our on start so that our collection gets built. And we're just going to drop our template size down because the template size is huge there. For these, we know they're only going to be a specific size. We can set it to 40. There we go. So we've got all of our categories. We've got safety gear, footwear, accessories, outerwear. Now, I don't always just add anything into the gallery anymore. You can now add containers into gallery. So I'd recommend you do this. Always add a container into your gallery and get it to do the sorting. There is only one in here, but I'm just going to do this for the sake so you can see how it works. Then if I wanted to add 2 items, I would be able to keep them in line just using the container. So then I'm going to drop my text inside my container. I'm going to set my X position to 0, my Y position to 0. I'm going to set the width to always be the same size as the parent, which is the gallery. Got template width here on, and the height to the parent dot template height. There's another good reason I do this, because just get rid of the drop shadow on there, because with galleries as well, you have the gap or you have the template padding. Now the problem with the template padding is if you look closely, you'll see that it actually pads the left and the right hand side. It really annoys me when I'm trying to build pixel perfect apps, because it puts that 5 pixels in there, which means that that text is not in line with this text. So I always actually just get rid of that. I don't use the template padding anymore. We can get rid of that, and to create padding, set the padding on the container. So at the bottom, because I want the bottom to be the gap, I can set 5 pixel gap. That means now that there's always going to be 5 pixels at the bottom of each template, so it's going to give that feel of a gap. I'm not going to lose the gap on the left hand side, meaning everything's going to line up perfectly nicely. Now where we do need a gap is this container on the left. We've got text, and then we've got our category items, which are really close together. We want to put a gap in there. Now I tend to stick to the 4 multiplier, so anything will be either a gap of 4, 8, 16. So let's set a 16 on that one. See how that looks. So that gives us a nice big gap between the header and the categories. Go on to our text here. Put this in. So this is going to be, do it in capitals just because that is a header. We want it to stand out and be readable. We've got our categories, and then we've got each category underneath on the left hand side. Now the other thing you'll notice here is if we're going to do any filtering, we can click on these and we can have safety gear, footwear, accessories, but we don't have an all. And to make this really easy now, we've got the new table function. So if we go to our gallery, go to our item, what we can actually do is we can say, this is a table. I want to add an initial value. So I want a value of all. And then we're going to have a distinct. So now it creates a new collection or a new set of items, and it includes this record in it. Now, if you weren't using distinct, you could create a single record with all of the different values in, but because this is using distinct, it creates a new table with just value. So we're just saying there's a value and it's all. We're going to do that. And the last thing we want to do as well, just so we can get these in order, is I'm going to do a sort by columns. We're just going to sort this as well. And we're going to sort that by category. So we're going to sort that by value because it's our distinct. And then we're just going to close that. And now we've got our all accessories, apparel, footwear, outerwear, safety gear. We can see that in action. If I go to my collection here and I pick a new category, let's just call this new. Runner on start, you can see we get the new in there. So if your data source updates in the background, your app's going to stay up to date. Much easier to manage, just a much better way to do things. Get that back to accessories. Runner on start again. We've got our categories. At the moment, these are just text. Now, because they're now in a container, when you click them, they don't always work. So what I actually do now is use buttons. So the new buttons can be used just as text or as icons. I'm going to put an input, a button in there. I'm going to take this item.value out of that. I'm going to set the text on the button to this item.value. I'm going to do the same again. So I'm going to make this button, let's get rid of that text. I'm going to make this button flexible width. It fills the whole box. We're going to align the text on the left hand side of it. And you'll notice again there's a padding. The buttons come with padding. It has no value. If you set it to 0, it's going to drop that off. It'll go right to the left hand side. Now I don't want them to look like buttons. I just want them to be clickable. We're going to go set the type to transparent. Set the font color to the color.white. So now these are actually buttons. And now this button in the on select, select gallery 1. And now that's going to call the on select of the gallery. So it's going to skip past that container and select the gallery. Now in the on select, what I'm going to do is I'm going to call an update context. And I'm going to prefix this with loc because it's a local variable. The difference is that I can only use this in this screen. I don't need it on any other screen. If it's something you want to click on and you want to use across screens, then you'd use set. For the purposes of this, we're just going to call this current category. And we're going to set it to this item.value. So now when that button is pressed, it's going to set the value of the item that's pressed to the current category. And we're not going to use that yet. We're going to use that later on when we actually start doing some filtering, just so we can see it in action. Let's add some text in here. Change that to white so that we see it. So we're going to set the text to current category. So nothing's clicked at the moment. If I click on it, now we get the text from the value. So again, we're not having to hard code the buttons. Say when you click this accessory, you just say this item.value, meaning that when anything changes, the whole app is going to change as well. A really good practice to get into. Get rid of that for now. And what we need to do is, because there isn't a category set, just in my app on start, for the purposes of this demo, I'm just going to I'll put it in there. Oh, need to put it in our screen on visible because we can't update context variables in the app, obviously, because that's for the entire app. But when this screen comes visible, we're going to update context. We're going to update current category. I'm going to start with all. All is just the first set that we want to see on there. Right, so now when that screen becomes visible, all will be the first category that's selected, and then people can go through and select the different categories. And now on the right hand side, I need to put my header bar in, and then we're going to build the gallery. So in the top of this header, I want to show like a breadcrumb. I want to say that we're in the page. I want to show the category that we're in. Then we're going to add a sorting option, and we're going to add a cart at the end as well. For the sake of this, I'm just going to hard code the breadcrumb with work clothing. But in a normal app, if you had a set and you were moving between screens, or if you had higher level subcategories, you could use the update context to get it. I'm just going to add a new container. Now, because this container is going to have 3 elements across it, I'm going to use a horizontal container. I'm just going to add that in. I don't want it to have a flexible height, because I know roughly what height I want it to be. I'm going to set that to about 60 so that it sits right up the top here. Just get rid of that shadow because we don't need any shadow on it. So the first element I'm going to add is my text. I'm going to bring that up to, again, about 22. Change the font color to white. You'll notice that I need now to add the actual category on the end. So before we've used concatenation where we've used ampersand, you can use the formula concatenate and concatenate strings, but this is one of my favorite ways to do it. If we actually just open with a dollar value, then what we can do is inside here we can say actually there's going to be a variable, so we're going to set it to lock current category. So now we can actually just build the entire string without having to worry about adding spaces in and all that different stuff. So yeah, that's just a much easier way of concatenating. One other thing we can do is, because this is going to be a header, what we can actually say is I'm going to set this entire thing to upper. So it's going to take all of that string, it's going to turn every single character into upper characters. Now, when I'm building these apps as well, the one thing that I like is symmetry. I hate it when things aren't aligned. So you can see here we've built this, we've got this at the top, we've got our categories at the top. Now what we could do is we could move this right up to the top. Then we can get it in line. What I'm actually going to do is I'm actually going to switch this around a little bit, just so I can show you how some of the spacing works. And instead of having a left and right container, I'm going to add a single container across the top, and then I'm going to move the other categories and the gallery into one below, so I've got a full single layer banner at the top. So let's do that quickly. I'm going to switch my main container to actually be vertical. I'm going to move this up to the top. I can need my top bar. I'm going to remove the flexible height on that. Set it to about 40. And then I'm going to set another container. So inside of this one, I've got my top and I've got my bottom. I'm actually just going to add another container. I'm going to make it horizontal. I'm going to move my categories inside the horizontal container. Then just need to take the height of that up to 40. There we go. Now, I want my work clothing to be over to the right hand side like we had it before, and I want it to be in line. So what we can actually do with this, we could add another element in and make it that size. We could work out the size of this. We could set something to 200. So what we can do is we know this is the size or the width of this container is set to 300. What we could do is we could go in here and we could say in the left set 300. The problem with that is it's not going to adapt when my app adapts. So I don't want to hard code that 300. Actually, inside my, we've added that into the text instead. We want to put that in the container on the left. So what we actually want to do is I'm going to reference the categories container, which is, it's called container 5 because I haven't been renaming my components, which is why I recommend you do it, because then you know which ones you're looking at. I'm going to set it to the width of that container. So now, because I'm looking at my app and I've decided actually that's probably too wide, I want to drop that down a little bit because I want more space for my items. I don't want as much space for my categories. They're not that large. They're not going to be much longer. So I want to set this to a slightly less. So if I drop that to 200, the other things come with it as well. So I can now reorder and redesign my app without having to go and recode all of my numbers. So a really good practice to get into is actually just referencing different things instead of hard coding specifics. Now we've got that set up, we've got a container here. We can put our gallery in as well. So we can put our gallery directly into this container here. Make sure we get rid of that shadow on it, otherwise it's going to look weird. Now if we put a new vertical gallery in there, we can set this to our actual items again. So IntelliSense on my local collections doesn't seem to be picking up at the moment. Let's just set that to our work clothing items. So we've got all of our work clothing items. So now we've got our header bar, we've got our categories, and we've got our gallery in the middle. So again, I'm just going to get rid of everything in there because I don't want any of that. You'll notice in the demo actually as well that I had these left to right. Now I am using a vertical gallery, but I'm using the wrap function to wrap them because I want a certain amount to be across. I'm going to hard code the number across this, but in a normal responsive app, you would want it to change based on the width of the app. So you'd work out the width of your template, and then you would set it so that as the app gets smaller, if it's on a mobile device, that actually it drops to 1 or 2. I mean, generally with responsiveness as well, there's a whole different way of thinking when we come to mobile. So this entire app would have to switch around completely different topic for another day. So we're not going to worry too much about that. We're going to consider this a tablet or desktop app for now. Let's just set our gallery to the full width. So flexible width on there. I'm going to set our template size a bit smaller. Don't want it that big at all. We're going to set our template size to exactly match 2 items top to bottom. We're going to take our template size and we're going to say, however big you are, I want the template to be half of that. So now we've got, let's put something in there just so we can see it. Let's put a rectangle in there. And always click on this little button, otherwise it won't end up in your gallery. Let's just expand that out so we can see. Now we've got 2 templates, and again we've got that gap in it. I don't want that gap in it. I'm going to create the gap by filling items inside the container because I don't want that left and right, because although it will be a small difference, slightly off from the left hand side of this text, those little things are what make apps look a little bit wonky. So we want to make sure everything's in line. So we're going to completely get rid of the padding. I'm going to bring it right out. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to say for this rectangle, I'm just going to drop it in a little bit so that we can see the gaps around it, how we create those. Now I'm going to set my gallery to have a wrap count of 4. So our rectangles are actually larger than the things, so we're just going to drop those back in. So you can see now, if I drop that to just inside, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4 items across and 2 down. If we scroll, we can see the other items beneath it. And you can see we've got this scroll bar on the right. Again, we don't actually need those to be able to scroll. We can get rid of them. So normally for apps like this, I get rid of the scroll bar on the navigation. People know that's going to scroll. They can scroll up and down it on an app. You can put the navigation on, so people do know. I tend to leave it off just for cleanliness. And now what we need to do, we're going to build the actual card inside of here. So let's get rid of that rectangle. And just as before, I'm going to add a new container. I'm going to add a new vertical container. And as always, click the little icon so that you know that you're inside. We're going to set this to the parent, which is the gallery.template width. We're going to set the height to the parent.template height. And then I'm going to add some padding around it. So that's how I'm going to create my space. Now, I want them to be left aligned because I want them to align with the text on the left hand side. So we're going to give it the illusion that there's a gap, but actually our container is going to be using the top right hand side here. I'm going to just set right padding of about 8 and then bottom of about 8. So now anything I put in here is going to have a gap on the right and the bottom, and all the other cards will. I'm aligning them to the left hand side because this is where everything's lined up. And then we're going to have a slight difference on here, but we're going to use the pattern on the right to keep that the same. Now we just need to add in some elements. Now this is going to be our main container. I'm going to put another container inside of that, just so that we can have a different color. Because if I was to use this container, yes, I could do top to bottom. So you'll remember in the actual image, there's an image and there's a card. I want to set the background of the element that is going to be my fake card, not the actual container itself, so that we can keep that nice gap around the edge. So I'm going to nest another vertical container in there. and it's going to consider that gap that I put on there. Now you can see we've got that space around it. Get rid of the shadows. Now, if I was using a different color, you'd be able to see this better, but I'm actually going to put a shadow on that. So you can see all my cards now have a nice little shadow. You won't notice it as much in the other app. Let's just make sure. I think we've got some. Oh, you don't. Okay. So then you can see we've got this nice shadow. We've got a nice little gap. I'm just going to increase that gap actually, because we want as much space as possible between things. So give that 15. Just makes them clearer. If there's not enough of a gap, yes, we're fitting more on the page, but it just makes it really clunky and everything kind of gets in the way. Then I'm just going to change the background color of this. I'm going to change that to color.white. Got a nice white background. Then we've got we've got 8 cards on the screen there. Again, I don't think there's enough gap. We've got that shadow which is kind of merging over the top of itself. So let's set a much bigger gap on that. Let's take that top container and just boost this up. Maybe we'll do so our minimum width again. So I did that 32 and it hadn't gone. And that's because, again, because it's on flexible width or it's on stretch, the minimum width is making it actually stay bigger than it needs to be. So we're just going to drop the minimum width off, get rid of that. Then it's going to let that gap happen with it. Oh, now let's just add some content in. Drop in an image. Maybe the image for our file. Stretch that out. We're going to say the image is this item.image. We've already set those. I'm just going to stretch them out because I just went and found these off the internet, so they're not perfectly sized. Yours should probably be perfectly sized. And I want this container to fill 50% of that entire container there as well. So I want the image actually to be flexible height for now. And then we're going to put another container in there because we're going to put our details at the bottom. So our image is 50% of the card. Then we've got a bit of space down here to work with to put some of our other options. And what I'm actually going to do as well is you'll notice there's a rounding on the container, which, I mean, it does look pretty cool, but for this app I'm going for more of a square look. So I'm going to get rid of radius, square them off. Nice. Square them off. All the edges are gone. I mean, all the roundings are gone, and we've got some nice edges. Make sure we've only got shadow on the inner card. Don't want the shadow on that one there. Now we can start adding some text. Got some text in there. This one can be this item dot name. Stretch that out. So the name is going to be one of the most important ones. So I'm going to bold that up. Got a nice bold name on that. And also you can see we've got it's right on the edge. So we don't want things right on the edge. Again, we just want some space on that. So this container that's containing all of my text, I'm just going to put another bit of padding on it. So you want 16 left and right, and another 16 at the top. Give it some space. Yeah, we've got a bit more space there. Need to get rid of that minimum width. That's going to fill that space perfectly. Lovely. And then we're just going to add another piece of text underneath. This one is going to be the description. So the description, we don't need that bold. We're going to drop that down to just medium. Give that flexible height because this is the one that needs the most space in there. And then we've got our category and our price that we need to drop in there. So let's drop our category and price in there. So if we copy this, the category. Now, top to bottom, it's kind of starting to run out of space. So the category is actually going to be quite small. So I'm going to have loads of room down this bottom right. So that's the perfect space to put the price. In order to do that, I'm going to need to put another gallery in. So I'm going to kind of nest this one. So I'm going to get a horizontal container. I'm going to move my category inside it. This horizontal container, again, it's got flexible height, but it's got a minimum height of 100. Let's just get rid of that. It drops it up a bit more. As with all containers, we've got a shadow. We don't want a shadow. And again, we've got it on stretch, and it's got a minimum width of 250. Highly annoying. I have to keep getting rid of those. And for this one, again, I'm going to semi-bold that. Just make the main text and then the description and the category stand out a little bit. Now my name's kind of getting lost there. I've got the name and I've got the category, and they're kind of getting confused. So I'm just going to bring up the size of the name just so that it stands out a little more. That down a bit. So now we've got the name, the description, and we've got our category at the bottom. Last thing we want to add is our cost. Now one thing that I've been using a lot as well is the new badges that go in here. So just go to insert, add in these new badges, badge. And these are like pills that are used in HTML. So we can use them for identifying different color coding and different categories and stuff. But for this, we're going to use it for the costs, just so that it looks pretty cool. I don't like the circle because we're going with more of a square vibe. I'm going to just drop the width on this. So I want that to just drop a little bit so we can see this for now. I'm going to change this to filled or outline. Then we're going to switch it from circular to square. So we've got our nice square theme. Perfect. And now we want the content to be this item dot cost 25. And again, we're just going to use that concatenation just so that we can put a $sign in front of it. I do keep putting pounds. I used to live in the UK. I now live in Australia. So I do have to remember we work in $bucks here, not pounds. Here we go. Nice little pill there. I think we just need to make that a little bit bigger because we can see here it's kind of dropping the edge off. It's dropping the edge off of that. Let's just give that a little bit of width. Maybe we'll give it 40. Bit more just so that it stands out a little bit more. It's got some space then around the number and it's not getting too cluttered. Now I want this pill to be on the right hand side, but I don't want it to fill that entire gallery. I just want it to sit in the middle. So I'm going to tell it by using the aligning container here. We've got set by container, which would be whatever this is, but we can tell this one to go in the middle. So this one is just set by stretch. This one now sits in the middle. I'm going to set that back to flexible width. We're going to put some padding on the right hand side. Again, I'm going to put maybe 16 pixels right hand side there. There we go. So we've almost got it. We've actually got a nice gallery there. Does need a little bit of tidying up because there's still a big bit of space at the bottom. Everything's a bit cluttered here. So I'm going to use some YouTube Magicry just to mix and mess around with this to make it look a bit cleaner. There we go. Just a little bit of Magicry. All I've done is just sort of reduce the space between these to give me a little bit more size. I have just changed the font color on the description to a lighter gray, just so that it doesn't stand out as much against the header and the category. I've just put all of the category in upper, just so that it stands out as the category. I just shifted it all around, giving it a bit more space so that it looks a bit tidier. So you can see there it looks a lot cleaner, a lot nicer, everything's readable and we can understand the different elements in the screen. I mean, it's not perfection, but it's just a really good starting point as well. So now what we need to do is we need to be able to apply our filters. So whenever our filters are applied, we want it to do something. At the moment it does absolutely nothing, because all we did in our gallery was we literally just added the items in. So what we need to do is actually we need to say that these are going to be filtered. So we want to filter the working items by the lot current category equals the category. So if we click on the category now, see it filters, perfect. But the thing it's not going to do, it's not going to filter by all, because all actually isn't a category. So what we need to do is we need to say in here, if lot current category equals all, then just show me the collection work clothing items. Otherwise, if it's not, then filter by the category. So now if it's all or anything else, which shouldn't be, then it's going to show all of them. And if we click on the categories, it's now going to filter down to the different categories. So perfect. We've got a pretty good looking app already. We've got our items in there, we've got our breadcrumb, we've got our dynamic categories, we've got our beautiful modern themed backgrounds. Take a look at that. Looks quite nice in the blue actually. I do like pink. So now what we need to do, we're going to add in a sorting option up here. So again, the modern controls. This is where some of my favorite controls in. The new buttons save me so much time because with the new buttons, we can add an icon. So we are going to set an up arrow. I'm going to say price. Then we can switch these around. So we can say the icons after, the icons before, the text only, or the icon only. And I use these icon only buttons as well now as just icons because the new icons don't actually let you click on them. So we use the buttons. I'm going to say icon after. I'm going to call it price. I'm going to bring up the font size on that so that we can read it a bit better. Just bring that up to about 18. We're going to set that to the full width. And again, we just need to get rid of that minimum height. Say no minimum. So the container that it's in, if we have a look, is actually, again, not the same size. We need to do flexible height, get rid of that minimum. So we're going to set it to the parent container above it. Perfect. Actually, since we switch this around, we actually don't need that inside of that top container anymore. We can drop that out, shift this up, reorder, move that to the top. Height, set it to about 40, which should be enough. And in fact, set that to 60. Then we're going to put some padding on the bottom. Just so that we've got that size, but we've got that gap between it again. Just keeping gaps between things just makes things much easier to read and nicer. So here we go, got some space. We're going to switch this to transparent because actually I don't want you to see it as a button. I want it to just be something you can click at the top. It's text. Set the font color to white. Nice little price. And the icon in here, because it's outlining, is just quite thin. I'm going to set it to filled. Lovely. Now what we need to do is on this on selectors, we're going to actually use this as a context variable so that when you click on it, it either sets the items to be ascending or descending based on price. So when you click this, we're going to update the context. We're going to have a lock price sort. We're going to set it. And we could set this to true or false, but then we would have to write some if statements to say if it's true, set it to false. The easiest way to do this is actually to say lock price sort, set it to not lock price sort. What that's going to do is whenever it's clicked, it's going to change. If this is true, it's going to change it to false. When this is false, it's going to change it to true. So we can just click it and it will change it from false to true. Have a look here, it's false. Click it again, true. Click it again, false. We're just going to use that. So in a normal app, you'd probably have a few different sorting. We're going to stick to simplicity just for the sake of the demo. And now that we've got that done, we actually need this arrow to change. So at the moment, while it's true, it's an up arrow. What we want to do is we want to go to our icon. And we're going to say if lock price sort is true, we want to have that as ascending. Then we're going to have up. Those arrows are called icon arrow up. Put that back in there. Arrow up. Otherwise, we want it to be arrow down. So now that icon's going to change when we click the button. Up, down, up, down, up, down. And again, real dynamic. We don't have to set anything specifically. There's just a nice up, down, up, down. Use that quite a lot in various different apps, just for really simple ways of changing an icon using the same button. You don't have to replace the button, all in one button now, which is really nice. Let's improve on this. So we've got our items in here. If it's all, show all the items. Otherwise, filter it down. Now, I want it to sort, right? I want to sort by columns first. Because if this is going to be looked at, it's going to look weird if it's not in by order. So let's sort it by name. So let's do sort by columns name. Now when we click on them all, we'll have them all in alphabetical order. CEHHS, perfect. What we actually want to do is, because we've got our price sorting, we actually want to sort it by cost, right? We've got it by cost. We've got cheapest first, and then we've got the most expensive last. And now we want to change the sort order. So automatically, this is set to ascending order. So it's going from the lowest down, lowest up. But what we can do is we can now put an if statement in here. So we can say if, because normally we could just say ascending or descending. What we're actually going to do is we're going to say if our local variable price sort is true, then we want the sort order to be ascending. Otherwise, we want the sort order to be descending. So take a quick run through that again. So we've added our sort by columns. We've said if the category is all, sort just all of them. Otherwise, filter them down by the category. Sort them by cost. If our context lock price sort is true, set it to ascending. Otherwise, set it to descending. And now when we click our price button, we can see it goes from high to low, low to high. Nice and easy. Now that's pretty much our gallery. We've got all of our items in there. We've got our categories. It looks really nice. It looks really simple. We haven't overdone it. We've got one color in there, sort of divided up our elements in the screen so that we can see the difference between them. We're almost there. Next step, add a shopping cart. So the first thing I want to do, I'm going to add another button in here. We're going to do something very similar. We're going to set an icon. I do believe there's a shopping cart. Now, as much as I love these new icons and I love the buttons, there aren't many icons in here. One way I normally get around that is by using SVG icons, which I'll go into in another video. I do believe I have a cart in here. Perfect. So what we want to do is we want this cart to show, let's say, the number of items plus the cost of the current cart. We don't have any knowledge of that because you can't even select the items at the moment. So the first thing we need to do is we need to make these selectable. And one way I'm going to do that is I'm going to use a button that sits over the top of the containers. Now, 99% of the time I want everything to be in a container because I want it to be ordering itself and I want it to be flexing with the container and the size of the app. But for other times, sometimes I want to lay something on top of the other, and this is one of those instances. I want to put a button that sits over the top of the entire card just to make sure that whenever this card is clicked, one single thing happens. I don't want to have to go and make sure all my elements are set to the parent of the gallery. I'm just going to put in here a button. Move that button up there, so X and Y. And again, I don't want to set the width and height specifically. I want it to be the same as this container here. This is container 12. I'm not going to rename that because I should have been doing it all along, because if you rename containers in an app, all of your flex boxes go out the window, everything starts to look terrible. Best practice, rename everything as you go through. Let's just go to our button. So we know we're looking at container 12, which is our actual card. So we're going to set the width to container 12.width. Do as I say, not as I do. You'll save yourself a lot of time. Container 12. So then for the height, container 12.height. That should exactly match that card underneath. And button. And actually it's not going to. So there's a little slither of white. And why is that? It's because set a small amount of padding just at the top when I went through my YouTube wizardry, just because I wanted the shadow to show at the top of there. But actually what we also need to do is we need to set our button, we need to set the Y to container 12 dot padding top. Actually it's not container 12, it's container 11. That's my main container, so that's going to shift it down. So now it sits perfectly over the top. Then I'm going to use the transparent button, get rid of the text. Now I've got an invisible button, so now I can handle the on select of this button and it doesn't look like the button's there, which means that this entire element becomes clickable. And also when I hover over it, I get my cursor as well. So now what we need to do is we need to start building our cart up. So when people click on an item, we want them to add that item to their shopping cart. Now there's multiple ways to do this. This is one way. There are other ways. In this, I'm going to collect, which is to say add an item to a collection. Collection user basket items. And we're going to add this item. So it's going to add the whole item into this collection. So if I click this, we now double click, look at this collection, see that item's in there. If I click another item, I'm going to add them in there as well. So we only need them in the app while people are using it. You could do the same to a data source, but until someone's actually bought it, we don't need to store that information. Or maybe you do, maybe you want to have some kind of lost cart type element to it and you can add it straight to the data source, but we're just going to work with the collection. Same would be exactly the same, except you'd be patching this item back to the data source rather than collecting it. Now that we've got items in our cart, we can fix this button up a bit. So in our text, we're going to use our string concatenation, and we're going to say $, and we want this to be the sum of the items. So let's work on that in a second. And then afterwards, we're going to put the number of items as well. So a couple of really simple formulas here. This one is actually much simpler than it seems. Like, how do I go through my entire collection, total up all of the numbers and get a sum of my actual cart? It would seem like it would be really difficult. You'd think, oh, I'll have to loop through them all and add them up. But actually, it's really simple. We just use the sum function. We tell it the thing we want to sum. So we want to sum, in this instance, our user basket. Really annoying that my IntelliSense is not picking up my collections at the moment. Fine, we can just go and get it. Now we're going to sum them by cost. Done. That will literally do what we need it to do. Seems really difficult, but actually it's really simple. And then inside here, we want to say how many items have you got in your shopping cart. Again, there's a great formula we can use, count rows. We can say count rows, again, use our basket items. How many rows are in there? Now we've got a total. If I click on some more items, I'm going to update. You can see that's got a bit bigger as you've added more items. And if I want to go really mad, I'm going to end up with much bigger. What we actually just need to do, we need to expand the size of this out. So let's give it a bigger width. Let's call it 120. I mean, if someone spends over $9,999, I'd be very happy. Stick with that. Again, I'm going to change the icon style to field. It looks a little bit nicer. And then I'm going to change the type to parent font. There we go. So we've actually got a clickable element there, which is a button, but it just looks like some text sitting next to our price, which is really nice. But again, our price is set to a much higher font size. So just to keep things similar, so everything looks nice and pretty, bring that up. We're going to have to increase the width on that again a bit more. 60. Yeah, perfect. Now we've got a nice little cart. Now you can see here again, I don't know if anyone always notices this, but once you get into building apps, you'll start to notice all the small differences in heights and width. So I can instantly see these don't look the same height, and it may not look bad straight away, but if you really want your app to look really good, we want everything to be in line. We just need to expand that out, and then it should line up. So now we've got a nice, these are all in line, that's in line, that's in line. There's enough space between those, I think, so we can leave those as they are. Do our price, add items to our cart. Perfect. Now all we need is a way of people accessing the cart. So we're going to build a modal. Now with modals, again, I want the modal to sit over the top of everything. So I've got my main container here. I'm just going to shut that down now. That's got all of my assets in. It's got my gallery. It's got all my bits in. I want to add a modal that sits over the top. So I'm going to add a new container. I'm going to add a vertical container. I'm going to do the same as I did with my previous. I'm going to set it to the app.width. And I'm going to set it to the app.height. I set my X and Y 0. This is where my modal is going to sit. Now with modals, you'll notice what it does is it kind of puts a black canvas over the background so that it nulls out everything behind it, just so you can read the modal and make it more accessible. So we can do that by going to our fill. So currently it's set to black. If we add 1, this final digit is transparency. So if we set it to 1, you can see the entire black. What we can do is we can set it to a point, and we can create that like shaded effect over the top. I'll go with a 0.4, just so that you can still see kind of what's going on in the background, but it's nulled out, so people will become aware that that's not the main focus of the app anymore. And then I'm going to put another vertical container in the middle. I'm going to set the fill on that one. I'm actually just going to set it to white smoke. So not fully white. I'm not going with full white in this app. I want it to have a bit more of a nulled effect, because we're going to put some white elements on top that kind of poke out on top. If we just use white on white, you kind of lose the depth of things. Now, because it's a modal, I don't want it to take up the whole screen. So I'm going to set some padding at the top, bottom, left and right. And for my modals, instead of setting it specifically, I like to use the app's height and width as a guide. So I'll say at the top, I want it to be the height divided by 8. So now as my app goes up and down, it will just keep a ratio of padding at the top. I'm going to set the same on the bottom. I'm actually going to set it to itself dot padding top, so that it's the same amount. And then with the left, I'm going to do app.width divided by 5, because I don't want it to be quite as big. Let's just check, maybe 6. We'll set it to about 6. We'll set it to 5, otherwise then we can sort of see that it sits over the top of the background, which will look quite nice. Then on the right, I'm going to set it to itself padding left. Cool. And in fact, now looking at that with that on top, I think we need to just set the container fill be a little bit higher. Really get rid of some of that background. There we go. Now we've got a main focus element. This is our modal, and this is going to be our shopping cart. So in this, we're going to show all of the items that people have in their shopping cart. We're going to let them add or remove quantities. We're going to let them remove entire items, and we'll have a button at the bottom that we're not going to implement that would essentially allow them to go on and order or pay for those items. So let's get filling it up. So as this is a vertical container, the first thing I want at the top here is I want the title of what it is we're looking at. I want them to know what this modal is doing, and I want to have a little close button up the top right. So inside this top to bottom container, I'm going to insert a little horizontal container there. Then inside that, I'm going to insert some text. This is going to be the header of what our modal is. We're just going to type in that this is a shopping cart. And again, because this is shopping, because this is a modal, I'm going to set it to upper. Now, obviously I typed this, but if you had a real app and it had multiple modals, what you might do is when the button is pressed, it tells the app what the modal is, and then this would be a variable. For this one, I'm hard coding it. That's why I'm just showing you that I would use upper. In this one, set that to flexible width. I'm going to bring up the text a little bit. I'm going to set that to a semi-bold so that it stands out a bit. Now again, we don't want everything up the top left. We want to create some space here. So in this main container, what we're going to do, we're going to add, again, as I did before, what I would normally do is set 1. If they're all going to be the same, set your top one, and then set your bottom one to the same as the top, left to the top, right to the same as the top. What I would really like, if Microsoft are watching this, if we could just set all of them in 1, but we can hope dream. Let's just get rid of the shadow on that. So now they've got that inside there. We need our icon. Now, in the new modern controls, you do get icons. Again, not the most exhaustive list, but you do get icons. We would set that to dismiss. We'd have our icon, but the problem is these are not clickable. So in fact, it's telling us up here now, these are not clickable icons anymore. So we only use those where we want an icon next to something for visibility, not for actual functionality. For actual functionality, we now need to use an actual button. And in our layout, get rid of everything except the icon. X in there. Then what I want to do with this one is actually I want it to be a square. So I'm going to set it to its self.height. And I do this a lot with icons and buttons so that they just have a nice square effect. I'm going to fill that out and I'm going to current. There we go. So we've got our little X where it says shopping cart. Now what we need to do is just make this openable and closable. As we did before with our price sorting, on our onSelect, we're going to create a new context variable, update context, and we're just going to call this local show modal. We're going to set it to the opposite of itself. So now when that button is pressed, it's going to update this context variable. And because we have everything here, which is our modal, in a completely separate container, we can use that context variable to show and hide the modal. So I'm just going to set this to show modal. So now that's only going to pop up when show modal is true. We can now make our cart button clickable because it's a button. We can go to our onSelect and we can put in that exact same context update, show modal, show modal. Now, one good habit I'd get into is for screens that have modals and various different things in the on visible, make sure you update the context to false. So we can just do this inside here. So we can update multiple context variables at the same time. We're just going to make sure that that's set to false. So every time this screen loads, that modal is gone. If we have an app with multiple screens, they may switch screen. We don't want them to come back and re-see the modal that they were already using and cause absolute chaos. So we just set it to false when it's visible. Now if we click this button, our modal pops up. If we click the X, our modal disappears. Simple, nice simple modals. Now we need to fill this out. So we want to put our actual items in here, and then we're going to put some functionality in to add and remove them from the collection using the GroupBy function. The first thing I need to do is I've got my container here with my shopping cart and X in. Next, I'm going to add in a new vertical gallery. This should not be that big. Let's get rid of the flexible height and let's just set that to perfect. And in this one, what I'm actually going to do, I'm just going to set a small gap. I want my items to have a bit of space between them. I'm going to set this gallery to blank because much as I love it, I don't want that layout. I'm going to set that to stretch so that it fills the whole thing. I'm going to set it to flexible height because I want it to stay within the modal, and we're going to add some bits at the bottom so it will flex on itself. Now we can start adding some items in. So what are we going to show in here? Well, we're going to show our local, our collection, which isn't going to give me collection name as usual, and I always forget what I called them. The user basket items. Now we can start building this out. Now, one of the things I wanted to show you is another reason sometimes why I don't always use containers, because we can have this left to right, but we're going to do something a bit different just to make it stand out a little bit. We're actually going to overlay some elements in here. So first we'll start with the basics. We're going to start with the container that we would normally put in it. We're going to have a horizontal container. We're going to set it to the parent template width and the parent template height. Get rid of our X, our Y. It sits nicely at the top. And again, I don't want to put a gap in here because again, it's done it. It's added that pixel, those pixels, and that's this template padding, which is annoying because really I only want the padding to be up and down. Same way a container works. You'll notice if I put a gap in the container here of like 40, it puts it in the middle. It doesn't put it on the left-hand side, which is how Flexboxes should really work. But for some reason, templates, the padding goes all the way around. So I'm going to get rid of that. And just to keep some distance between them, then I'm going to set the height of this. The padding at the bottom of this. I'm going to give it 16 pixels padding. So now each item will have 16 pixels between it because the padding at the bottom is defining that. And the template height I'm going to drop as well because I want to fit as many items in here as possible. Let's just start adding some bits in to start with. I'm going to set my template size on this to about 120, so a bit more items in here. I'm going to keep the shadow on this because I'm actually going to use it. But what I'm actually going to do as well is I'm going to drop this into the middle because I want to put a shadow on it. I want it to pop out a little bit. I'm going to drop the height by a 32. Let's do it by 16. And I'm also going to drop the width by 16. I'm going to set the X to about 8 so I can see my border on the left hand side. And I'm going to set my Y to about 8 so I can see my border at the top. I'm going to get rid again of the scroll bar there. You can see I've got a nice little shadowed box in there. I'm going to fill that with white. And the white against the grey is just going to make it pop a little bit. So we've got a nice card sitting inside there. We've created our gap without losing anything on the left hand side. Again, these are all sort of out of line. So by adding that difference in there, I've created an 8 pixel gap on each side. So I'm going to add the same to my top padding. Just added that 8 on the left. So now everything's nicely in line. Now we can start filling this up with some items. So let's put some text in. And we're just going to add in this item got name because this is the item that they've bought. And then let's add in the quantity. We can call this add quantity. And then we can say this item dot, well, we can't, can we? Because we don't know how many of this item we've got. We could have multiple in here. So actually, something else that we need to do first. We need to only have a single row for work gloves, but we need to say how many items are in there, and how much all of them cost. And this is where we're going to use the GroupBy function. So if we head back to our gallery items, we're going to use the GroupBy function. So what this does is it groups all the items together based on some of the values within it. So we can aggregate, we can actually even sum some of these values. So if we want to have the name of the item, these are the columns we want to take with us, the image of the item, the cost of the item, and those are the three that are going to be the same, right? For all of these, the name's the same, the image is the same, the cost is the same. So that we don't need to sum them, filter them, sort them. We know they're going to be the same. So we can group by those and have a single value for each. Now the last thing that we give it is actually a table of all of the items that exist. So we can say, give me a collection or a table of items. Now that's going to have sorted it. So we've got multiple work gloves, multiple ear protection, multiple safety vests, and multiple hard hats. And then just to make this nicer, we're going to do a sort by columns. And then we're going to do name. So we're going to sort them by name. Oh, we've lost our group by on there. Do love it when IntelliSense tries to break us. So we're just going to use sort actually rather than sort by columns. We can sort these coveralls, ear protection, hard hats, safety vest. Perfect. Now again, we just need to add some space. What I'm going to do is just add a bunch of stuff in here for now, and then we'll sort it out afterwards and make it look pretty. We can come back to our quantity now. So now we want to find out how many of these items do we actually have. This is really easy now. We can say quantity of these items is equal to, close that. All right, we're counting these. We want the count rows of the items. We know how many items there are. And it's this item, dot items. This item, because this is the item and it has the table on the item. So this item dot items, count rows, this item dot items. We've got 12 of those, 2 of those, 9 of those, 6 of those. So we're going mad on the spending today. So now we're going to add in the total cost of all the items. So again, we're going to create a concatenated string, put in the $sign. So this one we're going to create count rows. We're going to count how many rows are in this item.items, and we're going to multiply that by this item.cost, because the cost is the same. So it's one cost for them, but we know how many there are. So this item.cost. So there we go, $720 for 12 of those. Perfect. The last couple of things we're going to add is we're going to enable people to add and remove items from their basket directly from this screen. So let's add in a button. Now this first button, we're going to put an icon on it. We want this to be the down. So we want to remove items. Just the icon. So in the on select on this item, we are going to figure out how we remove one item from the collection. So in this one, the first thing we're going to do is we need to remove an item from the whole user basket items, and we need to tell it what is the item we want to remove. Now this item is now a group of items, so it's not the original item, so we can't just say this item. It won't know what to do with that. What we're actually going to do is we're going to do something quite random. We're going to look up from the user basket items where the name equals this item dot name. The beauty of lookup is it only finds one item. If there's multiple, it will just find one of those items. So we don't actually care in this instance. They're all the same thing. They're not individual. So we can remove a single item. So we're just going to look one up. So if we press that button, we'll see the quantity goes down and the price goes down. Nice and simple. Now we're going to add another button, but we're going to go to the right and we're going to add another one. So someone's come to my basket, they want more of these items. We don't want them to have to go back, add another one, come back in, go back, add another one, come back in. To make it really simple and easy, let's just let them add another item in this screen. So this function isn't going to change much. We're going to say just go and collect an item from the work clothing items that has the same name. We can just add, remove, add, remove, add, remove. So we're going back to the original work clothing items on this one. We want to add one of these items in the gallery underneath into our collection that is our user basket item. So now they can add, remove, add, remove, add, remove. And then the final button is we are just going to add in a single button. And we're going to give it the trash icon, which I'm sure exists. Yep, nice delete button, icon only. Now, we want to get rid of all of these items. They're saying, I don't want any of these in here. I just want to completely drop it. So we're going to use the remove if function. So we're going to say remove if. So remove if lets us remove more than one item from a collection based on a formula. So we're going to say in col user basket items where the name is equal to this item dot name, get rid of them. So if I click on this button now, I'm going to get rid of all of those. More, pop back in, get rid of all our ear protections, hard hats, safety vests, pop that back off. We've got loads of functionality here, real simple formulas, really effective. But let's be honest, that doesn't look great. We need to add the image in and we need to tidy this up and make it look a bit nicer. We don't have any items in there. Let's add some in just so we can see what we're working with. Go. So let me bold that. Now I want to add the image in there. Now, just to show you again why I don't always use everything inside containers is sometimes we want some pop out sections. So I want the image to pop out a little bit. I don't want it to sit in the card. I want it to sit over the top. So I'm going to go back to my gallery here. I'm actually going to just chuck an image directly over the top. We're going to move it over to the front. We're actually just going to try and make it bigger than the card inside. So I'm going to drop the size of this card. I'm going to set the height say 32, make that a little bit slimmer. And then I'm going to bring the Y value of this down to about 16, give it more space. And then for my image, I'm going to set it to the height, which is the parent.template height. I'm going to take about 16 off of that. And then I'm going to drop the Y by 8. And then I'm going to add a border radius to that. Add, say, 8 border radius. There we go. If we just check the size of that image, so it's now sitting over the top of the control, so it kind of gives it that overlap effect, which sometimes I think just makes things pop out a little bit. You could put it inside, there's no reason you can't. This is just a cool way of showing how you can kind of use containers and then layer things over the top just to make them look a little bit cooler. What we want to do is, though, we want to set the add-in left in here to the width of our image, so the image width, and then we're just going to add, say, 16 pixels. So now we've got an image in there, we've got our card, we've got all our items, and see how there's still a gap. So the gallery doesn't have a gap, we're just using all the elements inside to give it gaps. We want this image here to be set to the same X as that, so I'm just going to set the X here to container 18. And again, I haven't done as much here, but it's really good practice just to make sure that everything is related to another object. Have a single base object that kind of defines the positions, and then everything else should match it. So I'm going to set that to the X of that. Now if I wanted to move my container in 16 pixels, for example, my image is going to follow with it. That back. So some more YouTube magic, and the reason I'm using YouTube magic is that it's not a simple process. I kind of chop and change things around. I look at what I like, I don't like, and you don't want to watch an hour of me just moving things around until I think it's pretty. But essentially what I've done is I've kind of taken the name of the item, bolded it, made that the main thing because that's what we're looking for. Put the quantity in a lighter grey because I don't want it to overpower the fact that the name is there, but I want it to still be visible. And then I've just put the buttons at the bottom, just not as big, just so that they're there, but they're not taking up too much of the screen, just giving it a little bit of space so that it looks a bit cleaner. Moved the icon for deleting to the right and the total to the right, and just put it in that primary color. So I'm using for the color, the font colors, app.theme.colors.primary, which means, again, if I do change my theme, everything changes with it. You'll notice I do that throughout the app as well. It's just a really good way of using the same app, changing the branding. If your company's brand changes, or if you want to use this for 2 different companies, you can easily switch it out without having to go back through and update all of the colors. So that's almost there. The last thing I want to do is I just want to get this container exactly in the middle of this image. Now, there's some formulas that I used to use before containers to line things up, and those are still really good formulas to understand, because we need to get this container in the middle of this image. But we can't just say the Y is the middle, because then the top would be at the middle. We need to figure out how the container would fit in exactly the middle of this image. And the formula we use to do that, if we go to our container, we need to set the Y of this image. Now there's already a gap there. So the first thing we're going to say is we want to start our calculation at the Y of image 5. Ooh, definitely can't spell image there. So that's going to move, it's going to move it down to the top. So it's at the top. It doesn't look too bad actually. I want it in the middle. And the way to calculate the middle is to find the image 5.height, divide it by the self.height. So we're going to take the height of this item here away from the height of this object, which is going to give us the top part of it. And then we need to find half of that, because we need half of that gap to be at the top and half to be at the bottom. So we need to put this in brackets so that it doesn't miscalculate. We need to say divide that by 2. I'm just going to put these in brackets again, because what we want to do is we want to isolate all the individual calculations. If we got rid of some of these brackets, the self.height would divide by 2 before it did the division, the
wait, what?
subtraction. So we're going to isolate the subtraction first to get that, divide it by 2, and we're just going to make sure that that is calculated before we add it to the Y of the image. So now that sits exactly inside the image. If I adjust the height of the image, so let's just say I wanted more space, it would grow, but my card would stay exactly in the middle. There we go. So we've got our shopping cart, we've got our modal, we've got our items, we can add, remove items, we can delete entire items, we can go and add items into our cart and view our cart. The last thing we need to do is to really just add a total at the bottom and add a number on there. So there we go. Now again, there's a bit of a gap on the right, so I'd probably want to bring all of this in on the left hand side a little bit. I'm not going to spend forever doing that, but I think you get the idea. What we really want to do is just make sure we've got pixel perfect lines everywhere, keep everything simple, keep everything nice and clean, and then you'll have a perfect app. And there you go, just like that, we've got a fully functioning collection. We can filter it, we can sort it, and add items into our cart, open our cart, remove items, increase quantities, reduce quantities. We'd work on implementing a checkout. Best of all, we can change our theme to whatever we want. And that's that. Hop on over to my website, links in the description, download the solution file and do with it what you will. Please, if you do use it, consider buying me a coffee just to show your support, and do remember subscribe so you'll get notified about all my latest upcoming videos.